I want to talk about the history of a subset of false flag operations, those involving the United States, and I want to talk about the objectives and the purposes behind them. And once again, at the forum, I've posted a lot of references to information where you can read a lot more about false flag operations. The principal contention of the 9/11 truth movement in its alternative conspiracy theory to the official one is that 9/11 was a false flag operation carried out by the United States government. This is not the only claim, and perhaps not 100% of 9/11 Truth members believe this, but it is the majority position. The majority within the movement have concluded that 9/11 was a false flag operation. And there are lots of lines of evidence that that lead to this conclusion. But thinking along these lines is very difficult for lots of people. And there's lots of historical evidence that false flag operations have happened in the past, and that evidence makes the suspicion quite plausible. But to make the inference that 9/11 was a false flag operation, it's very important to look at all the relevant lines of evidence and to make sure that we're really dealing with facts. So first of all, I'd like to define what a false flag operation is. A false flag operation is an attack that is made to appear to be the work of a group or a country other than the one which the attackers actually belong to. And so it's an attack that is presented in a way that others are blamed for it than the actual perpetrators. And the people who pull these attacks off have purposes in mind when they do this. Rather than the people who are actually killed by the attack, it's the group which is blamed falsely for having done it, which is the real target of the attack, or one of the real targets. The attacks are designed to enable subsequent reactions, subsequent responses to the attack to get underway, and then they go after the real target, either the scapegoat who has been identified or the scapegoat and others as well. So the false flag operation provides a pretext to launch an attack, which is cloaked as a response to an attack. And these operations can occur on any scale. They can be as small as police provocateurs in crowds of demonstrators who attack phalanxes of riot police to give the riot police a pretext to attack the crowd. This has happened many times in recent years. To the large scale where there are fake military attacks, supposedly by a foreign country against a country, and in that case, they're designed to start wars. So they can occur on any scale. So I want to get into some terminology, because there is a lot of terminology associated with these events, and it's somewhat confusing. The way I understand these complexities is I consider a false flag operation to be one type of provocation. And conflicts can be provoked by various means. They don't always require an actual attack. And some provocations which work very successfully are simply where attacks are claimed to have happened. So that actually there was nobody killed, there was no actual attack, but the government which is claiming that an attack took place is able to do so because of its control of information, and that there's no way for people to immediately dispute the claim. So claims for attacks which are completely baseless and actually didn't involve anybody being killed at all have taken place as well. Another term that floats around out there on the internet is fake terror as a term for provocations. And the word fake in the term fake terror means that the people who are blamed were not the real perpetrators, although the terror, of course, that's inflicted by false flag operations can be very real. But typically in a fake terror attack, the way in which this term might be useful is when the innocent public is singled out. Innocent men, women, and children are killed to terrify the public so that it turns to the government for protection. And now, a provocation, I'm saying a false flag operation is one kind of provocation. There are others. A provocation is one kind of state terrorism. So there are different kinds of state terrorism. One kind of state terrorism is very, very visible and open and public. For example, Pinochet's regime in Chile after the CIA inspired and facilitated coup there in Chile in 1973. After he was installed into power by that coup, he proceeded to arrest, torture, and murder thousands of people. And this was very well known. This was very public. He was able to do this without even making any attempt to cover it up. So that's a form of state terrorism, which is not secret. But a false flag operation, the government that has undertaken it doesn't want the public to be aware that it is behind the events. So a provocation and false flag operations are done to hide their sources and to create a reaction that benefits from the secrecy. There's another term that has come into use recently that is describing false flag operations. You may have heard this new term, SCADs, S-C-A-D, the plural, SCADs. And this S-C-A-D, a SCAD, is a state crime against democracy. This term was used in a recent academic journal called The Behavioral Scientist, I believe, that did a whole special issue on the 9/11 attacks and raised the question whether the 9/11 attacks were not indeed a false flag operation. But apparently it was necessary for the publisher of the journal not to use the term as emotion-laden as false flag operation, so they came up with a sort of an academic euphemism, state crime against democracy. And so now there's some literature out there that's worth looking at where the term SCAD, S-C-A-D, is used instead of false flag operation. It's a term, I guess, for people who don't like to look at this information straight on, take it neat, so they use a euphemistic term. And from my perspective, there's another minor problem with the term, which is the democracy part, state crimes against democracy. Well, that implies that these only occur in states which are democracies. And then the other problem is the question whether any states in the modern world are democracies. And when you say that the state crime is against democracy, it sort of is a euphemistic quality there, because instead of people being the victims, it's this abstract idea, democracy, which is the victim. The crime is against this abstract concept. And of course, there's not a lot of agreement on precisely what democracy is. So it's not, I don't think, as good a term as the old, reliable standby false flag operation. Okay, well, so now in the 9/11 Truth Movement, we've been talking about this for years. Some of us concluded in 2001 or early in 2002 that 9/11 was a false flag operation, because even back then, the memory of prior similar events was still alive, and and we were comparing things to earlier events, comparing the 9/11 events to earlier ones. But for most people, in the United States especially, it's been difficult for them to think along these lines. Most people in the United States believe that U.S. rulers, U.S. Political and military and corporate leaders are incapable of taking actions like this, that the United States is an essentially well-ordered and largely benign society where people have opportunities and where the rule of law is paramount. And these things, these qualities even permeate up to the highest levels of the leadership of the country, and that it's not likely, in fact, unthinkable, that Americans would be capable of doing this. American leaders would be capable. This may be due to what's called American exceptionalism, where people have really extreme ideas of the good nature of the United States compared to other nations, or it could be common, to other countries as well, that each nation has its own notion of national exceptionalism, so that Germans don't believe that German leaders could do this, etc. That UK public doesn't believe the UK leaders could do things like this. But the thing is, you have to, when faced with events of the magnitude of 9/11, with the impact that they've had on the world, it's necessary to bite the bullet and look at the evidence, and not to reject the evidence based on these a priori beliefs. This rejection in the United States has been not just on the part of people on the right or people in the center, but very much people on the left as well. So it's pretty much across the board. So what I'd like to do is break down the notion of American exceptionalism with respect to false flag operations, and give a little mini history of false flag operations that the U.S. has been involved in, or related, related phenomena. So now, Americans don't reject the notion that other countries do this kind of thing. Americans don't reject the notion that the Japanese in 1931 used a false flag attack on their railroad through Mukden to give them a pretext to take Manchuria away from China. And they don't reject the notion that the Nazis, about a month before they came into power in 1933, burned the Reichstag fire in Berlin on February 27th, 1933. Americans, don't have an a priori need to deny that this plan orchestrated by Goering and Goebbels and carried out by the stormtroops was designed to bring the Nazis into office a month later, to sweep them into office based on the public's having been terrorized by these events. And after the Nazis came into power, they immediately launched an unparalleled persecution of leftists in Germany, communists and socialists, workers, party members, intellectuals on the left in Germany were swept into prisons and held, and many of them never lived to talk about it. Nor that Germany was incapable of launching World War II with a false flag operation. Operation Himmler on September 1st, 1939, took place when the Germans dressed up as Poles and attacked German border posts on the border with Poland. And then the German government claimed that they had been attacked by Poles. This operation was pulled off by the Gestapo and the security service, the SS. And that was the pretext that Hitler used to launch the war on Poland. But the question is there any evidence that the United States has ever done anything remotely comparable? So the answer is yes, in fact, there is. So I'll give some examples here. I won't go into a lot of detail, but I'll go back as far initially here as the